Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. I have a very, very special guest here for the show today. Can you go ahead and announce to the world who you are and where you're calling from?
Hi, my name is Dr. Lorenzo Neal. I am calling from Shreveport, Louisiana in the current moment.
Okay, Mr. Neal, I just wanted to tell you that I appreciate you coming on my show, and thank you. I made sure I picked the right one. So can you go ahead and tell me a little bit about your past leading up into your present?
Uh, oh boy, where did I start? Well, I have been a Christian minister for the last 35 years. I started preaching at the age of 12 and was licensed at age 16 and have been in ministry since then. But the pivotal part of my childhood comes at the age of 5 when I lost my 25-year-old mother, Sharon Neal, to a domestic violence act that involved a gun where she lost her life and uh, left 4 boys behind. And so that's the pivotal moment of my life and the work that I do in gun violence prevention, advocacy, and ministry.
Wow, and tell me about how have you tried to advocate for your mother's early expiration, you know? Because
Uh,
she was in crossfires with guns and violence, right?
yes, yes. Um, well, I work with an organization called Every Town for Gun Safety, and that I am a senior fellow representing voices and stories of persons who are survivors of gun violence from across the spectrums of America. Uh, Gun violence impacts everyone. It is not just the stories that you hear on the nightly news, but also the stories that are not reported, those persons who are injured. Every day, over 100 people are killed in acts of gun violence, but hundreds more are injured, and those stories don't go reported for the most part. So, in my role as a senior fellow, I share my story of how I've been impacted by gun violence, losing my mother in 1980. That's been
It was
44.
like that in 1980 she lost her life.
Yes, it's 1980. So, well over 40 years ago. But that trauma still kind of resonates with the work that I do. Um, as well as in 2016, I lost my 18-year-old nephew, Kevin Neal Jr., also to gun violence.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but
Hmm.
the solution needs to be that since we only have metal detectors in government buildings. Could you agree? Or schools? Can you agree on that? Why can't we get metal detector, some type of ray gun metal detector that can detect guns that's illegal on people that's on probation, people that's carrying them for no protection? It's no reason to carry one, really. And then shoot out and I heard about this 5-year-old girl in Atlanta, Georgia, that was not driving. She was in the car while her mother and her auntie was driving. And this guy just started busting and she got shot. She got shot, said my stomach hurt. And it's just sad. We need more protection for all races, of all ethnicities. That's how I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. And in my role as a fellow, one of the things we do is advocacy at the state legislature and the federal level. And we've helped craft laws for states that are called red flags laws that prohibit persons who may be a harm to themselves from having access to weapons. But we also have helped craft legislation in states that prevent persons with violent offenses, felons from carrying a gun, even though sometimes they still get access to them. Um, we
How can
also
we prevent this access, though? You know more than me. How can we prevent at the core this access coming into these felons, these probation and parole people, and these people that are just wanting to do harm to our community, whether black, whether white, whether Hispanic American? How do we cut that access off, sir? You're not there no more. You kind of cut off. Mr. Lorenzo, are you there? Are you there, sir? He's working on it. While he's doing that, you guys, I have been a Philly and I've been to a lot of places where I used to use my phone for interviews and it used to be so hard to do. And sometimes your phone just completely goes off. He's logging off and back on, but I used to do the same thing. And I was on KC for the first time, KCAA. I was on your guys' radio station with a lady, I forgot her name, but I was so happy. I was like, affiliate to NBC, yeah. And then next thing you know, what happened was my camera phone went out. And I was like, no. So I kept logging back on and kept logging back on. And she's like, you are persistent, ain't you? I'm like, yes, I am. So I don't know what to say in between then because his camera phone has been out. I don't know if I should call him, but we're going to continue this talking about gun violence and stuff. So, my interpretation on gun violence. He said his mother passed away in the 1980s. We had an excuse in the 1980s. Not enough technology. There he is. Hold on. There he is. There you go. You having trouble with your phone?
Yeah. I it is that way sometimes. But what I was saying is that we have helped states craft legislation to prevent those things from happening. You can't prevent every person from having access to a gun. One of the things that we advocate strongly for is keeping weapons out of the hands of children and getting those keeping them inaccessible. Hundreds of children injure themselves or even lose their lives because they have access to weapons that are not secured safely. As a gun owner myself, I try to be responsible in securing my gun owner. I try to be responsible in our state, Louisiana, and my former state, Mississippi, where there's concealed carry and permitless carry. People are openly carrying their weapons, and sometimes their weapons are not secure. To answer the question further, restriction is where it comes in. We have to be assertive and aggressive with our legislatures to demand that they pass legislation that is a little more restrictive when it comes to that, to gun legislation, those persons who can have guns and have access to them. Much of the problem comes with gun trafficking. We have research and that shows that is a prominent problem.
Yeah.
How we contest that is the question. Again, it goes back to gun owners such as myself being responsible gun owners, making sure that we store our weapons securely. That even in states where there is permitless carry, mostly in the South, that those weapons are not in the cars, unsecured, things of nature where people can come in and steal. But the biggest thing is responsibility, and ensuring that our legislators provide common sense, responsible gun legislation in states where there is loose legislation. That's the biggest proponent. The other thing is to quell the gun violence pandemic and epidemic. We have to be informative and educate citizens, especially those in minority and urban communities, about the dangers of guns. Even as a gun owner, one of the things I recognize is that I have a responsibility to model responsible gun ownership. And not only should I model responsible gun ownership, we should also deter those persons to see it as a Wild West kind of thing, where everybody should have their own weapon and just be able to go off at any time. We have to model responsible gun ownership.
Okay, so one day we're going to end up having detectors in churches and everywhere if we don't watch out. It starts with the outside. You have gun violence, people coming in churches shooting people, whatever the race, people shooting people at movie theaters. Those are statistics that's nationwide. But my question is, when you have passed these legislator laws and are trying to, you're right, we should be more affirmative and more assertive about our rights, because it just seems like so many children, they get a gun, they play around with it, and they get shot in the head or something, whatever the race. And then you have people, teenagers that have guns, that want to see how it feels to shoot something or someone because their minds aren't mature, and then mix drugs with that. We have to start not letting people play the system. I'm pretty sure the system knows who is trying to play the game to get out of probation and parole and who is not. I think we should have more influence from the probation and parole officers on what, like, they should do a walkthrough of their house, like, randomly, and because these guns are it caused your mother death prematurely. It causes children to die. If we don't stop where we are and really think about a solution, maybe my solution isn't right, but if we don't stop and really think about a solution for everyone, we're going to have metal detectors everywhere. We already have them in schools, but churches and grocery stores and many more places that you would normally not find one, it will be one.
And you're absolutely right. And it's unfortunate. There was just recently, this past week, an incident where a man walked into the church and in Pennsylvania and pulled a gun in front of the pastor and pulled the trigger, and the gun jammed, so the pastor was not harmed. And the congregants immediately responded to detain and to disrupt that situation. And in Mississippi, legislation several years ago passed a Church Protection Act, which basically required all churches to have some form of a security team, detail team that was trained and had concealed carry license, so that if anything happened, uh, the church, if they had to discharge a weapon within the church premises, that would be liable. Um, that stems back to 2015, if you remember, at Mother Emanuel AME Church, where a young man walked into Mother Emanuel on a Wednesday night during Bible study, sat during the entire Bible study, and then after the Bible study decided to open fire, uh, taking the lives of 9 individuals, including one of my brothers in ministry, and 8 other congregants, and injuring 3 other persons. Um, so we don't want that type of environment. Again, hundreds of persons lose their lives daily to gun violence, unnecessary gun violence, um, senseless act of gun violence. We don't want to live in America where in our school systems children practice gun drills instead of tornado drills like when I was coming up.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
we don't want to live in a system where individuals, particularly in faith communities, not just Christian communities, but also in the Sikh community, in the Jewish community, those faith communities have all been impacted by gun violence. And no one wants to go to their faith community where it should be a place of sanctuary and feel this sense that they could be attacked. You don't want metal detectors, but you do want people to have a sense of safety, and that's being lost. The more states pass legislation that seem to promote the idea of the Second Amendment, which I am a proponent of because I am a gun owner, um, we don't want this to be an environment where the idea of safety overtakes the idea of security. And by security, I'm not talking about, you know, everyone being able to put down situations similar to what happened this past weekend. I'm talking about security in the sense that we can come to a place especially a place of worship, a place of education, a place where we can relax or shop and have that sense of security, knowing that we don't have to feel threatened for our lives. And again, it goes back to demanding our legislatures act and not deter it anymore, and not just give little little things to make us feel slightly safer. Each after every school shooting, every mass shooting, legislators would come both on both sides, condemn the act, but not act hastily or urgently. And so we have to put that fire under them to see the sense of urgency regarding this epidemic of gun violence.
Well said, Mr. Neal. Now, I have a question in a statement. You know, when you sign up, I don't know if each state is different, but it's on a federal level. When you sign up to get a weapon, I had a weapon. I had like 30 weapons in Mountaintop, Pennsylvania. Did not shoot no one, did not threaten no one, nothing. And I carried it on my waist. But the competency, we need to crack down and have like a competency that's based on a spectrum of the psychiatry field, where they fill it out. And we know they're going to lie, but there's ways that psychiatry can be written down for somebody to not lie and show that they're not competent to hold a weapon. Because the basic questions they ask is not enough. So my next statement would be, for the future, I see, we may, which I hate. You're right. When I was growing up, we had tornado drills. We had the to salute and all of this great stuff. It made me feel proud to be an American. But now, people are slipping into our churches and doing hateful crimes. And I just feel that our future, we need to, if we need to protect our children, we may need to start doing those fire drills and doing it in abundance, where they teach. Because when Columbine happened, nobody was looking at it. When another thing happened, it was another huge incident like 10 years after Columbine, and nobody was, like, a bunch of Mexican kids got shot. I'll put it to you like that. They were in Texas or something. Somebody slipped in. That could have been the next president. It was Mexican American children. And it was a hate crime. And it took the police down there forever to get into it. But had they had the drill, because children need to be aware of their surroundings, these days. And I feel like right now we need to have some type of drilling. We need to have more detectors. This is up to the federal level to have and bring more police officers on each state level, whether Democrat or Republican, where they are at churches down the street, because this is what it's going to come to when they're at grocery stores, that like maybe contractor police officers, like the ones at Target downtown. They have contracting police officers versus the city police officers. We need more of that, because I'm tired of these criminals blaming it on the drugs, blaming it on something else, an underlying problem with their mental health, and getting away with crimes that is sick. It's sick.
Yeah, and I understand your perspective. Many state legislators, when they are trying to craft legislation regarding um, gun violence prevention, that often comes up. The idea of mental health, the idea of criminal backgrounds, and all of that. And you have certain legislators who see that as opposition to constitutional rights, individual rights. And there's some truth to that. But again, when we talk about the overarching society, what is in the best interest of our society, particularly when it comes to our children? There are more school shootings that happen every year, and across the country. Most of those never get televised because it doesn't draw ratings. And that's probably not the best way to say it. But there are a lot of mass shootings happen uh, yearly, annually, and one of the ways to be preventative, again, is to be proactive. And this is where our advocacy comes in. being informed, being engaged, creating an informed public regarding legislation that's already on the books and how that legislation can be better enforced and promoted so that individuals can have that sense of security. The other thing also is educating the public regarding uh, not just the legislation, but policies and procedures when it comes to uh, responsible gun ownership. We don't want to deprive anyone of gun ownership, but we want those persons who should not have access to weapons not to have access to weapons. We also want those persons who, we want to enforce these background checks at the federal and state level, which most states do, and the federal government has strengthened its federal background checks for that. But again, uh, the average person is not generally informed about all of these things. And the more informed and educated they are, the more proactive they can be in promoting prevention. And that's where our voices like mine, who are survivors who've been directly impacted by gun violence, that's where we stand to tell these stories, to tell our stories, to tell the stories of the mothers, the sons, the daughters who lost loved ones by gun homicide and by gun suicide. Both of those go hand in hand. And once we engage the public to be more proactive, they'll see how much prevention is necessary. And that in turn will sway, the court of public opinion and mostly legislators to see the great need. That's why we do the work that's why I do the work that I do, and hundreds of others like me put forth our time and energy to inform, empower, and engage the public regarding this epidemic of gun violence.
Well said, Mr. Neal. Tell me, like, have you developed an app or anything yet? Like, for maybe elementary. I don't want no money for this. I tell everybody this the other way because it's just I feel like apps are wonderful tools to get more people coming to you, or maybe do a webinar. But the app will have either elementary, middle, or high school students, or even college. That's where it happens the most at, these colleges, a preparation tool for them to see if there's any weird behaviors in a woken type app, so that they can see the behaviors if a fight breaks out. Walk the other way, don't go up to the fight, or maybe the area that you're in, looking up the area to see how many crimes have been, you know, done, how many shootings, how many robberies, or how many anything, the app will have that. And it will be able to if they're children, the parent will be able to get the app for the child. If they're college adults, because when you go to college, it's starting to happen at the colleges. People are starting to get shot there too. So maybe they can see the activity, and maybe it could be one for teachers too. Who knows, man? Just so much information you have to give right now, and you're giving to me that I didn't know. So Neal, my question is this: do you think that 10 years, a decade from now, that we may end up, what do you see for the future 10 years from now with gun violence?
Actually, I see a positive turn in 10 years. I think with this generation of young adults and children who are seeing how gun violence is directly impacting them, they'll be a little more proactive, and they are already vocal. Go back to the young people from Parkland High School, from Parkland, that had a shooting, I believe in 2018, and those students raised their voices and they created what's called the March for Our Lives, which I was a part of, and I was able to participate. I was able to be on panels with those students. I was able to be in the halls of Congress at hearings regarding federal legislation with those students. Also, just last year, we were at the White House with President Biden and Vice President Harris with survivors from Uvalde at the Texas shooting, Uvalde, also survivors from Parkland, Columbine, and many other mass shootings across this country that's happening. We were raising our voices, celebrating legislation, bipartisan federal level, but also still helping our leadership, national and state leadership, see the need for that. There's no particular app that I can think of, but there are a plethora of resources available to educators, uh, to students. They can go to organization called Students Demand Action. For parents, they can go to an organization called Moms Demand Action, and the Everytown for Gun Safety Research Network um, provides all a plethora of information that is readily available to any person, so they can see the statistics, particularly in urban communities. They can see where those communities are fighting back against crime with what's called interventionists and programs that's available, funding for those programs, the grants to violence interrupters, so that people can feel safe in their communities. And again, the bipartisan work that I do consists of persons, again, who've been impacted by gun violence. uh, Despite political affiliation, we all share the same sentiment. We want to see gun violence end eventually. And I believe that we are in this age where persons are being fed up and they are readily challenging the status quo, including organizations like the National Rifle Association, uh, calling to account their legislators who vote in opposition to legislation that be favorable toward gun violence prevention. So I do see a bright future ahead in the next 10 years, largely because of the work of volunteers like myself and individuals who know just what happens to a person, a family, a community, a state, and a nation when gun violence really is not directly addressed.
Well said. Oh my God, well said. I have a question and a statement now. You know, gun violence is such a, we're going to move on, but this is the last subject because I feel like, wow, you met Kamala Harris and Biden. That is awesome, and y'all got to chit chat about the gun violence. But I don't believe that the. I mean, my opinion in a bipartisan way. I don't believe necessarily that it's a 50-50 thing, possibly, but we're not there to see them purchasing those weapons and how they getting it. Now, I've been to the ghetto in Philly where it's nothing but gunfire all through the night. And I spoke with a young gentleman who told me that he purchases guns like parts and parts and then puts them together. So that's, I don't think that's NFL. You know, he showed me the weapons and I was so appalled. And what can I say? I'm, there. But it's just the fact that I want to know where. I didn't ask him where he was purchasing those weapons from, but I know that the NFL based on the fact that he is a convicted felon would not give him a gun. The National Fire League or whatever it's called, they would not give him a weapon based on that. And he said that he brags about it. He said he can get a gun anytime he want, big, small, and just they send it to him in parts. Do you know about that? And do you know where these guns are coming from initially for people that can't purchase guns? How can they get them without the National Fire League or whatever it's called? Sorry.
Yes, it's called ghost guns,
Yes, yes, ghost guns.
and again, it's a major contributor to the gun violence pandemic that we're having in our country because um, readily assemble parts. And because these parts, and sometimes the serial numbers are scraped off, and because the um, the federal organization that oversees uh, gun activity
Mhm.
is backlogged. So a lot of times when they try to trace these guns, they're unable to do so. Again, uh, persons, you know, robs or carjacks a vehicle, and that person has a gun in that vehicle. That gun now gets into possession of a person who should not have access to it. They could sell it and make a quick profit, or they could disassemble it and get parts. There are a number of ways ghost guns are accessible. The good thing is the federal government has become aware of that, and again, part of the national legislation has been a ban on ghost guns. Even though it's hard to track, uh, they are uh, raising the standards and coming up and basically uh, improving their approach to tracking them and getting them off the streets. It's not just a problem in that area; it's a problem in urban communities across this country. And again, it goes back to state legislatures being aware of the need for such legislation at the state level. You can have it at the federal level, but if it's not at the state level, then it's not as effective. So it goes back to again empowering our citizens to be able to speak to uh, truth to power regarding legislators and letting them know how impactful this really is. You know, it's not just about Second Amendment. As again, as a gun owner, a responsible gun owner, I'm an advocate for the Second Amendment, but I'm also an advocate for those persons who should not have weapons to not have them. And we have to reframe how we approach this with our legislatures so that they can see the urgency to act.
Well said. But my question is, where are they come? How do they develop ghost guns? I mean,
Uh,
some people say they
yeah,
have.
there are a number of ways. There's no trafficking of guns is very hard to track. States, for example, Illinois, those guns are usually trafficked from other states into Illinois. Here in
Uh,
the South, uh, it's trafficked across the South, and it's just very difficult to trace. But uh, again, at the federal level, they are putting forth for a greater impetus to make sure that they can do that. But it has to be reinforced at the state level.
and each of them have, even though it's a bipartisan federal type thing, each of them have their own opinions, just like an abortion type. You know how abortion clinics are in certain states now. It's not just fully across the United States. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
So they all have their own opinions about how they want, if they want to crack down on guns being, ghost guns being
Yes.
trafficked. So trafficked. So my next question is, after you met President Biden and Kamala Harris, what was the dialogue of the conversations that y'all had, again, about what? What did
Well,
y'all address?
all the dialogue revolves around the story of survivors, those persons who have been directly impacted by gun violence, as well as the need for more legislation. Um, so that's what all of the dialogue is. We uplift the stories of the individuals, the families, the communities. That's what we drive home. And both President Biden and Vice President Harris, as well as all many other former presidents and vice presidents, share the same sentiment of uh, putting an end to this crisis, this epidemic. The it's just a matter you know, of not making it a partisan issue. This is not a partisan issue. This is not about being, in some words, woke. This is not woke advocacy. This is human advocacy.
Mhm.
This is not uh, uh, aligning with where we are ideologically, on the political spectrum, but it's about seeing humans and seeing how those human lives are being impacted anytime someone commits an act of gun violence. And you have to be a pretty heartless person to,
Yes.
to act against the needs of your community, against the best interests of your community. Uh, until you don't want somebody to start changing their mind when they finally get impacted by gun violence. We had a state representative in Louisiana who was uh, who was shot, and
Oh
for a
no.
moment changed his rhetoric regarding guns, but then has since basically regurgitated much of the pro-gun advocacy language and rhetoric. Our goal and our anytime we meet with legislators, not just president and vice president, but with state legislators, with federal congresspersons, senators, and U.S. representatives, as well as with uh, governors of states, our primary goal is to help them see the individual behind the statistic, the story behind the statistic. And when you humanize the person and not just make it a headline, it pulls at the heartstrings.
Well said. You know, have you ever did your digging to find those people that has been impacted that isn't on the news all the time? Because in Philly and where you're from, they just highlight the people that will get airtime for just that split second. He died. They may not say a name. They may say a name depending on if it's relevant to getting more viewers to watch. But have you ever just looked up somewhere in a death, the records of death, people that's been shot, and went to their families and asked them, do you want to be a part of this movement? Do you want to be a part of this movement so we can help, determine that gun violence is happening, even if you didn't get your 15 minutes of not fame, but info to inform the world or the United States or the states or the district of what's going on?
Well, the good news is I never have to dig. I don't have to search for those families because nobody wants to be a part of the community that I'm a part of. Nobody wants to be identified as someone who lost a loved one to gun violence.
Yeah.
So my role and our organization, the Every Town Survivor Network, is the organization that I'm a part of. Um, we do not promote at all. We don't want people to be a part of it, but we want those persons who have had enough strength and courage to raise their voice and share their story. We invite them to be a part of our organization so that they can add their story to our work. It's not about I travel around the country, and it's not about my story. It's not about my comrade's story. It's about all the people who have been impacted, who are still wrestling with and dealing with the trauma of that loss. Those are the people whose names will, you know, uh, the names may be in the headline, but the people won't be at the funeral. You understand? And
Yeah.
so what we do, what our organization does, is we let my persons like myself share our stories, and if they connect, we invite them to be a part of our survivor network. But after they become a part of our survivor network, we provide them with resources, support groups, trauma uh, informed support groups that can help them and get them to a point where they're empowered to go and tell somebody else what needs to be done and take action.
Okay, I
And
have a story for you, Mr.
yes,
Neal. He did not die. He almost died, but I was on my way to the military. I was on delayed entry in the army. And so I don't know if it's a drug deal going bad or not, but all I know is that my brother, he used to sell drugs heavily. And this is why we need to clear out the drugs in the communities too. people get mad, and then you outweigh people that wants to go to jail and don't care by shooting people to make them look like the big bad guy, not to be messed with. And so, to be honest, I don't know any of his friends. So to get to the point, he was sitting in his house. I was upstairs asleep. All the several people in the house, it was like 10 people in the house, and he was the only one downstairs. All I hear is somebody say, Kimmy, Kimmy. And I thought he's always on joke time. And I'm like, oh God, what? And if I hadn't came down the stairs, he would have died. So I came down the stairs. He said, I've been shot and blood is coming out his chest like profusely. And I don't know what to do. I froze for just a minute, less than a second, anything less than a second. I grabbed the phone. I called the police. And the next thing you know, they come from the ambulance on. I didn't know what they did, but his story goes like this. He got to the hospital. They cracked his chest wide open while he was awake, and they did surgery, and he blacked out or something like that. But he survived. He has 1.5 lungs. 1.5 lungs. He don't have 2 full lungs now, and he's in jail again. But my point is, I really love my brother. I hate that he chose jail over his family, like his sisters and his mother. But is that something to talk about, or the person has to be completely dead?
Oh, absolutely not. No, you are, by our standards, you identify as a survivor of gun violence. Your brother was uh, uh, involved in an act of gun violence. It impacted you, it impacted your family, and it continues to apparently impact your family. So, yes, uh, you are a part of this, you know, just like me, you're a part of that. Um, we don't want people to die. Again, the headlines only show death, but hundreds are injured by violence daily. And that's what we don't talk about. We don't talk about the physical aspect of gun violence, how it impacts physically for every state. You know, there are hospital expenses that are involved. There are other expenses that are involved that are incurred. Some families are able to take care of that. Some are not. And so, gun violence is a very broad, very broad epidemic. And when we only limit it to the headlines of who shot whom, when, and how many, then it is able to go in one ear and out the other. But when we humanize it and put the person behind a person with the statistic to remind people that, yeah, somebody was shot, but this was an individual. Someone did lose their life to gun violence, but this person was a son, was a daughter, was a mother, a father, a cousin, an auntie, a neighbor. When you do that, it takes away the all the shame of gun violence, and that's what we try to do. We try to highlight these individuals, these persons, who, in sometimes by acts of their own, but most times by non-acts of their own, were impacted by gun violence. And
You
I use
know,
myself. I didn't choose for my mother to lose her life at the age of 25. But what since it's happened, there's nothing I can do. I can't turn back the hands of time, but I can share her story. I can live her legacy, and I can live my voice to empower persons so that they won't have to experience what I experienced.
yes, and you're on fire right now. The crazy thing about my story is the gate, the screen to the it was in the projects, the screen to the door was locked. Had the screen been open, he would have ran in there, took whatever drugs my brother had, and killed us all. That was the rumor that was going on.
Hmm.
But my question, that's what I live with. Now that's what I live with. Now, the question I have for you is, do you think that this gun violence is specifically happening in the urban communities versus the other communities out there that's more like probably rural or upgraded communities?
No, gun violence happens across the spectrum of American communities. Um, Unfortunately, a good amount of gun violence does happen in black and brown communities, minority communities, urban communities, but gun violence across the board impacts every community, every spectrum. It does not matter uh, where you live. You can live in a gated community and it can happen there. You can live in the projects, it can happen there. Part of the problem is the perception that gun violence is plagued mostly in urban communities, which is aiding to the non-action, the inaction of legislators. As long as the perception is it's only happening in this particular area, that to that a particular group of persons, we should not be concerned about it. But again, it happens to everyone. It impacts everyone.
That's I can see what you're saying, Neil, because you have families that go to church and they can end up getting shot. You got families that go into communities like when you go to downtown Philly, I've seen a lot of stuff in Philly. I keep referring back to there because I've seen a lot, you know, um, horrific things and good things. I got to visit the Freemason building that was closed. I guess they open on certain dates, and I'm an Eastern Star, so that intrigued me. But the point of the matter that I'm getting at is the fact that gun violence, it do affect everybody, and I agree with what you said and how you said it. So my next question is, where do you see yourself going in the future with what you got going on now?
Uh, well, my role as a survivor fellow, senior fellow with the Survivor Network, is ongoing. But in my professional capacity, I serve as not only as a pastor of a church, but also a pastoral counselor that specializes in trauma focused grief as well as family systems to where we help engage families through a particular model of therapy to um, be what is called self-differentiated. That's my area of specialty in the field of counseling. And so we integrate the spiritual component, the educational component, as well as the psychological component into our work in gun violence prevention. So it's not just me being a pastor preaching against, gun violence and all of this, but also my work as a therapist to be able to help. My battery is going low on my phone. I do apologize.
It's okay. Do you know how much life it look like it has?
Not much.
Okay, okay, we can cut this off. In 2 minutes, you think, or 3 minutes? Is it beeping?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, real quick. How can the people reach you then?
All right. The quickest way someone can reach me, you can go to my website, lorenzotneal.org, and you see all the stuff that's available there. And there's a contact page where you can reach out to me. If you like to email me, you can email directly at pastorlorenzoneal@gmail.com. And those are the quickest way to get to me. If you'd like to be a part of the organization I'm affiliated with, the Everytown Survivor Network, you can simply text the word survivor to 64433. That's survivor to 64433. And
Does it
then,
matter what city you in?
no, it does not matter. Just text survivor to 64433 and you'll be connected with uh, someone from the Everytown Survivor Network, and we can get you more involved as well as get informed of all the work that we do with organizations like Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action, and the Everytown Survivor Network.
Thank you so much for joining my show. When you get off, I'm going to get off of here. I'm going to talk about what we talked about for the next 4 minutes. Okay. I don't want your battery to just go out in mid conversation. Okay.
No
It was
problem.
a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye. And
All
I'll
right.
send you your footage right away.
All right. Thank you.
Bye. Hi, everybody. Wow, that was a great show. We have less than 4 minutes right now. And I just wanted to say that this guy right here, Mr. Neal, he is trying to save America right now, bringing people that has been through tough situations with seeing their parents or their grandparents or their children or their siblings just expire early. They expire early for no reason, whatever color you are. You have to think about that. What do we want to do? You out there watching, you can fight for what's right too. He's trying to get legislative laws to get passed, or he has passed them. And he spoke with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden at the White House. And I hope that he got whatever he needed from them, as in a bipartisan way. They would like to do this, with the gun violence law. Now, real quick, 3 minutes. I hope you listen to what I said. We can change legislative laws by getting a team of people together or organization that can go to the White House and talk to President Biden or the next president that come in about ways we can help keep America safe. It's not, to me, my opinion, it's not going to get is better, but it may get a little better. If we start taking into effect, our children are dying, our parents, siblings, period, across the board. So what we need to do is create a task, harder questions, psychological questions that cannot be, flabbergasted or lie on the gun form to fill out. Harder laws, federal wise. And then 2 minutes. And then we can also get other things that can help, such as after more metal detectors and more huddle ups for people, like, for instance, we can get together and start practicing ways we can get out of situations. If you're out there watching and you're rich, buy an app. Create an app for children, middle school children, high school, and college, to try to keep them alert and woke about what they need to do in case something happens. So that has been my task. I'm probably going to end up talking about that on my show one day. And definitely it's here too. So thank you all for joining my show. Thank you, KCAA, for having me as usual. And I will see you next Tuesday, y'all. I'll be back on here later. But thank you, KCAA. Thank you guys out there watching, 5 million to 6 million listeners. You take care. Bye.